Alright guys, welcome back to the garage. I know it's been a minute, been working on some things, but you read the title right. We're SRT4 swapping my 95 Dakota. Kinda. So what I got is a 2003 Stratus engine. Came from LKQ. Supposed to have 90,000 miles on it, and as you can see, it looks pretty clean. Now my only concern was I wanted 03 to 06 engine with the right crank trigger setup to match the 04 PCM that I have from an SRT4. So technically, yes, we're not using an SRT4 engine, but it just made more sense. Now, yes, I bought factory SRT4 rods to go in there, new factory SRT4 pistons to go in there. I've also got factory SRT4 accessory kit, so the alternator bracket, power steering pump bracket, compressor bracket, timing covers, all that to replace the Stratus stuff, along with used OEM alternator, power steering pump, and AC compressor. And then in here's a full SRT4 engine harness, engine bay harness, as well as the dash harness and a cluster. So like I said, we're running the factory PCM, all the factory wiring. We're gonna gut all the wiring out of the truck, so it's all SRT4 stuff. And we'll just have to adapt it to like the headlights and the climate control and stuff like that. So is this a true SRT4 swap? No, it'll have SRT4 internals, valve cover, accessories, all the wiring, factory PCM, which I sent out to have the skim security removed, factory boost control solenoids, all factory sensors from an SRT4. So why did I do it this way? Well, I got this shipped to me for 800 bucks and it's supposed to have 90,000 miles on it. And it's from an 03 Stratus, so most likely it's never been abused. Probably just somebody's daily driver, got in an accident, went to the junkyard, and that's how I got the engine. I could have tried to find a factory SRT4 engine, but who knows what kind of abuse the thing has had. Plus, a nice low mileage one is way more money than what I spent on that. Now, obviously I have money into the accessory set, the internals, all new gaskets, king bearings, sensors, and all kinds of stuff. So cost-wise, it might be the same, but at least I'll know that when this is done, it'll be a fresh engine with new bearings, completely gone through, essentially a new engine. So for me, it just made more sense to put together a NA24 with the SRT4 stuff than it did to find some unknown used SRT4 engine that I had known nothing about for the same amount of money, basically. But now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the truck. This is a 95 Dakota. It originally came with the Chrysler 2.5 4-cylinder with the 5-speed transmission, which we have right here. It's the AX15, and the important part is it has the Chrysler 2.5 bell housing. Now, from what I've read, this transmission and bell housing combo only came from 93, 95 Dakotas, 4-cylinders. Late 95, I believe they switched to the AMC 2.5, so the bell housing's different. Of course, everybody's wondering, does that bolt to the 2.4? Yes and no. What you're gonna have is these two matching, this one matching, but this one does not. Which is where you have to get creative to make those two match, because you definitely want at least the 4 bell housing bolts to the engine, which I've come up with a solution, and I'll share that in the next video. And another thing that's important is we have the Liberty Wrangler 2.4 input shaft bearing, which works with the AX15 because it shares the same 3/4 inch input shaft tip diameter. And I believe the AR5 also has the same input shaft diameter, so you could use that throwover bearing if you went the AR5 route. And like I said, the next video will go into more detail on how we're going to make these match up and all the details that go along with it. Now, before everybody starts commenting, just get the 2.4 Liberty bell housing and run an AR5. I didn't have to buy a transmission. The transmission came with the truck. I know a lot of guys think that the AX15 is super weak, won't handle the power, but you'd be surprised at what it can handle. I've talked to multiple guys about how the AX15 is held up behind their swaps. Some have used it behind a 2.4 swap. Some have used it behind GMLS's, Mopar Magnum swaps, all kinds of stuff with great luck. So I'm not too concerned about it. That's one expense that I don't have to worry about. The transmission came with the truck. So I understand the AR5 would be better. An R154 probably better. I know the guy that makes the billet adapter kits to run a T56 on the SRT4 swap. I understand all those things. Just it's too much money, and we're doing this on a budget. I put everything I have into this project, so we're gonna rock the AX15 and cross your fingers. But back to the truck, single cab short bed, 2-wheel drive. It's nice and straight, no rust on the body. Frame rails are crusty, but it's just surface rust. There's no rot anywhere on the truck. So Plan is to take all this out, clean it up. As you can see, I've already had the front end off. So we'll repaint the whole frame, redo everything, all the suspension, paint the firewall, the jams and everything, and I'm planning on wrapping it. And if this series takes off and I get a bunch of views on this stuff, maybe when it's time to wrap it, I'll post some options and you guys can pick the color. Interior, kind of the same thing as the outside. It's not horrible, it's not perfect, it just needs cleaned up, but everything's there. Like I said before, we're going to attempt to put the SRT4 cluster in here since we are using the full SRT4 dash harness. All we'll have to do is adapt it to the climate control, the turn signal switch, lights, rear lights, that kind of stuff. Pro Sport gauges for oil pressure and boosts. Still need to get a wideband. We got a Summit 44mm wastegate, cast log manifold, which is actually for 420A engine, but it will bolt right to the 2.4 Dodge head. We got eBay's finest GT30 right here. Should make 350, 400 horse, which is be perfect for this setup. And then a 420A intake manifold, which I'm sure I'll get a bunch of questions about how that intake manifold is going to work. And like I said, in future videos, I'll go over every single detail and we'll explain how to make that work. It does require some customization to the manifold and to the water neck, but I did happen to be able to put an SRT4 throttle body on it. I just had to make a little adapter to adapt the idle control valve port to the 420 intake manifold, which we'll cover later. SRT4 valve cover. Right here we have a Jeep Wrangler Liberty 2.4 pan and pickup, which then will give the engine a proper rear sump setup for a rear-wheel drive setup. And I know the guys that have done the Dakota 2.4 swaps have kept the front-wheel drive pan, but I didn't really like the idea of having a mid sump. And technically you should have the engine on an angle for that pickup to sit flat. I wanted the engine to sit straight up in the engine bay, so that's why we got the 2.4 rear-wheel drive pan and pickup. So hopefully it fits the cross member here better. We'll see once we get the engine and trans in the truck. And then again, engine harness, PCM bracket. PCM is sent out for the security removal. Engine bay harness. We got the truck AC stuff. I have the AC lines for an SRT4 also, so we're gonna have to do some custom work there to make the AC work. And then we have the clutch setup. Now basically I have two options as far as the clutch setup and flywheel setup that we're gonna use. First option and easiest option is this is just a cheap stage 3 clutch for the Dakota. So this will bolt right to the factory Dakota flywheel, which the flywheel bolts right to this 2.4, and then that keeps all the spacing correct for the hydraulics and then the throttle bearing and all that stuff. So that's the simplest option. The question is it going to hold? There's not a lot of aftermarket clutch options for the AX15 with the Dakota, so I also have a backup. Right here we have an ACT streetlight flywheel and heavy duty pressure plate, which we can throw this disc in here and run this setup, but there's a drawback. The ACT flywheel is much thinner than the Dakota flywheel, so that's going to put all the spacing more towards the engine block, which will require some custom work on the transmission side to space the clutch fork out to get that throttle bearing closer to the pressure plate. Not a big deal. If it comes to that, I'll just do it. But I think we're going to try to run the Dakota flywheel and the cheap Dakota stage 3 clutch. Just see how it goes. Now, as far as the starter goes, apparently the Turbo Dodge Denso style starter will fit in this pocket of the block. We'll have to relocate the oil pressure sensor to one of these ports over here, and there may be some tiny clearancing to do, but from what I've been told, it will fit with the AX15 bolted to the 2.4, just might require some massaging. But as of right now, that's the parts I have. I got 1000cc injectors coming from Front Wheel Drive Performance. I got a 3-bar map and tip sensor kit coming. Still need a wideband. Still need a radiator and fan. We'll need to get an intercooler and piping set up, blow off valve. But as far as the engine side of things, I think that's it. But the plan I have when we put this thing in here to build motor mounts is to get the transmission bolted to the factory transmission mount under the truck. That way we can keep the factory drive shaft and not change anything that way. Only thing we'll change is this way. So what I did was, before I took the 2.5 out and had it sitting in here, I measured from the bell housing up to the firewall, and you can see that there's my measurement right there. So I know what bell housing bolt to measure from. So we'll get it in there, bolted to the transmission mount, and hopefully with enough clearance, we'll get this same measurement. And that should keep the driveline angle the same as it was factory. But of course, there's gonna be tons of stuff we're gonna come across as we do this. So I hope you guys stick around. I hope you're excited for it. I'm super pumped. I've been planning and trying to do as much research as possible. And a few guys on Facebook were nice enough to share their setups and stuff to give me ideas. There's just not a lot of solid info on rear-wheel drive SRT4 swaps, though they've been done. They've been done in Dakotas. I know of 2 second gens, and apparently there is a first gen out there somewhere that has a 2.4 turbo swap. So I'm definitely not the first, but it's gonna be cool to be the one to document the full swap on YouTube so that people can watch and maybe learn something. So if you're not subscribed, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss future videos. Hit that bell, that way you get notified for the next video. I think I'm finally to the point where I can start doing some regular videos on it. That's why I waited so long to do any videos, is because I've been doing planning and buying parts so that I can be as prepared as possible before I start this. I've always been a big fan of the turbo Dodges and SRT4s. I had an Orange Blast SRT4 some time ago. So this is gonna be a fun little project. But how wild is it gonna be to see this thing rolling down the street and making SRT4 noises? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.